Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS. Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
Well, hello and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Apex Racing TV, and welcome back to the Evolution Sim Racing GT3 Championship. This is round number 5 of the season, coming to you tonight from Montreal. My name is Ron Mullins. Alongside me in the commentary booth is Aaron Smith, and in the virtual production hall we have Joshua Wilkie. Tonight we've got another hour-long race to bring the first half of this season to a close, and to do it we're running at one of the tightest tracks of this season. Montreal's a wonderful ride in my opinion though, so Aaron, what are your thoughts heading into tonight's race?
I'm mostly in agreement with you. I think this is a pretty good track. I've always seemed to have had like some pretty good luck around here. It's just nicely flowing. It's just a good track, especially in these GT3 cars, to fling them over those big curbs that in most Formula cars, if you even think about going over them, yeah, it's just GG, go next. But luckily for these guys, these cars are built to handle that kind of stuff. And wheel-to-wheel racing rounds here can be a bit scarce at times, but I think, like I said, in these GT3s, it seems this season we've had some just incredible racing. Last time out was some of the just closest, most intense racing that we've seen so far this season, and I'm somewhat hoping we get some of the same today. But of course, like you said, Ron, it's going to be the hour racing that we have for you tonight, so a bit more strategic focused. And some drivers maybe choosing different strategies. I think the traffic could actually be a bit of a problem around here, considering it's a bit of a short track. Only about 1:30 in these GT3s. So there's just a few more things I think these guys are going to have to think about coming into this race.
Certainly indeed. This season's been absolutely fantastic, but heading into one of these 1 hour long races, the third of 4 1 hour long races that we have throughout this season, these drivers trying to capitalize on a race where they can earn double points. That's definitely showed up in the past 2 hour long races that we've had. Le Mans kicked the season off all the way back on September the 26th. That was a 1 hour long race, and we had to go back to Barcelona on October the 10th for the second hour-long race, and the latest that we've had from this series. That race, heavily affected by rain, was a pretty entertaining one to be sure. This season, though, has been fantastic to follow, and the championship fights have been fantastic to follow as well. It's been topsy-turvy in all 3 of the classes. A friendly reminder to anyone tuning into the series for the first time, yes, we do have 3 classes: the Elite class, the Premier class, and the Evo category, so you can see those 3 classes marked out as so with the red, green, and white tickers next to their name on the beautiful graphics that we have here on Apex Racing TV. But the championship fights have been incredible to follow thus far. The Elite standings, the Elite category Tristan Denabrega and Luke Lucchesi, both teammates for RDSA Esports, have been up and down so far this season. They're currently running first and second in the point standings at 263 and 261 points respectively, only 2 points between the two teammates. Luke Lucchesi, the reigning two-time champion here from the ESR GT3 Championship, looking to try and go for his third in a row, but his teammate Tristan Denabrega in that brand new McLaren has been mightily impressive thus far, has 3 victories on this season, one of them coming just 1 week ago in the first race at Interlagos, but those two looking to pull away in the elite standings, as the next car to them is Ryan Odens, who's about 50 points off of Denabrega and 48 off of Luke Lucchesi in second. But that class has been incredible to follow thus far this season, despite the fact that we've only had 4 victories of the races that we've had thus far. The Premier standings, meanwhile, it's been a little bit more topsy-turvy. However, Matt Hoyland in that DXT Magenta BMW has definitely staked his claim on the points lead. 77 points in front of the McLaren of Nick Stube in second. He already has 4 victories on this season, 3 of them coming back-to-back-to-back. So Matt Hoyland looking to try and stake claim on his lead in the championship and trying to end this first half of the season with a whole lot of momentum. Speaking of momentum, it's not something that's really on the side of, frankly, any of the drivers in the GT3 Evo standings, very much so. Ashley Brooks, the MRC 493 Porsche, actually, it's a McLaren. It's marked Porsche according to the standings, but he is in a McLaren, and he's had a pretty good start to this season. Kicked it off with 3 victories, then had 1 more in the first race at Interlagos. However, he's off the back of 2 outside the top 5 finishes, one coming a couple of weeks ago at Barcelona, the other coming just the last race that we had of the season for race 2 at Interlagos, and that's definitely brought that GT3 Evo category much closer, as it's only 28 points between Brooks and Robin Noel Brown, currently slotted in second, and Francois Brandet off the back of his first victory of the season. He's currently slotted in third in the GT3 Evo standings. So some pretty interesting and contentious championship fights to keep our eyes on all throughout this season, Aaron. I know there's probably a loaded question, I apologize for asking it, but what class do you think piques your interest the most?
It is really, really difficult to say. I think the elite class, purely for the fight between Lucchesi and Denabrega, is a very, very high contender. I mean, it's the big one, isn't it? It's the one everyone wants to win. So it's not too surprising that that's the one I'm keeping the most eye on. I think Denabrega, like we were talking about last week, has that overall pace on his teammates so far this season, but just a few times, I think it was Indy Road Race 2 and last week in Race 2 as well, he just gets himself involved in these accidents that aren't usually always his fault, but it's just what happens during a season. And Lucchesi so far has just been that little bit more consistent. He's not finished lower than, I think, 4th yet, has Lucchesi, so he's got just that consistency about him, which could really help him come the end of the season. But I mean, it's a long old season, this. So you would say Lucchesi's the favourite at the moment, but Denabrega has got a lot of time to get that momentum building once again, get back on top. At the moment, he sits in 3rd in practice, which isn't too bad, but it looks like he's going to have some fair competition from not just his teammate today, but also from Andrew Fairley, who, let's be honest, has actually been quite quick this season, but again, just hasn't quite had the luck on his side. I think he was doing really well. I think it was a few weeks ago in Barcelona, but I think something might have happened to him, and unfortunately just fell all the way down the order. But Fairley is really, really rapid. As you can see, he's only half a tenth off Lucchesi at the top. Moving on to the other classes, I would say Premier, bit harder to tell so far this season. We haven't really had one driver who's necessarily been the best all round. I think it's been the most topsy-turvy class. Whereas Evo, we could all probably say that Brooks has looked the strongest so far, but again, just a couple races have let him down. Brandon, off the back of his first race win of the season last week, looks to be going strong. He's currently the quickest in the Evos in this practice session. Not by much, but it still counts. And behind him is Bostock, and then half a second to Ludbrook. So it's difficult to tell which one I'd say I'm keeping an eye on the most. I'd say probably the Elite for now, but the Evo as well, I think, is a very, very close second.
Yeah, honestly, all three of the classes have been fantastic to follow all throughout this season. Kind of feel bad about asking that question, Aaron. It's like picking your favorite child. But you brought up some very good points there in reference to the Elite Championship fight. As you mentioned, and you got it right on, you hit the nail right on the head there, Aaron. Luke Lucchesi has finished no worse than 4th thus far this season. That 4th place finish coming at the 2nd race at Interlagos just 1 week ago. Outside that, though, he has always been on the podium. So Luke Lucchesi, he may not be the most flashy driver at times. He may not have the most victories. However, just having a militant amount of consistency is possibly what's led him to 2 consecutive titles here in the elite category from the ESR GT3 Championship. So looking to try and go for 3 in a row. His teammate, on the other hand, Denna Brega, as you've brought up, he's been really unlucky at times in those second races. Some of those incidents that he's been involved in have been no fault of his own. Others have. But regardless of how that falling anvil struck you on the head, if you got that dent, you're going to be the one feeling it. So Denna Brega, at this point, hoping to just try and have a consistent and clean day here at Montreal. I mean, he kicked the season off in some pretty good fashion for the first 1 hour race that we had this season, winning at Le Mans. So at this point in time, Denna Brega looking to try and get some more consistent running going. Gotta say though, Aaron, with the difficulties he's run into in the second races, whenever we have the 2 30-minute race format, which we do not have tonight, however, we will be having a lot throughout the rest of this season. That's not good news for Denna Brega if he's going to have issues like that. The next 2 races that we have from this series at the Red Bull Ring and Watkins Glen, all going to be covered here on Apex Racing TV. We've got that 2 30-minute race format, and then we're going to end this season with 4 more 30-minute races between the final 2 rounds. So if you're Denna Brega, you really just want to reel in that consistency, because as his teammate is proof, consistency can be key.
Yeah, 100%. It's just what Denna Brega just needs to get under his belt, because, like I mentioned, so far this season, it kind of looks like he has the slight edge on Lucchesi, but like we also mentioned, he is a 2-time champion of this series, so that could also be, putting a little bit more pressure on Denna Brega as well, that he has to get one over his teammate, while Lucchesi can kind of sit back and just let the accidents happen in front of him. And, Denna Brega has 3 wins this season compared to Lucchesi's only 1, which is quite surprising. You would think that he would have more by now, but maybe tonight will change that. But also, like we were mentioning just 5 minutes ago, Fairley has just gone quickest in the elite class, so there could be some stiff competition. And actually, I think qualifying could be incredibly important today. Overtaking is not easy round here at all. It's very, very opportunistic. You have to just time it right. You have to be a bit patient and just sit back and wait for it. And I don't think a lot of drivers are going to have that patience. I'm going to be honest. It's just what racing drivers do. But as long as Denna Brega can maybe just get ahead of Lucchesi in the qualifying session, that's going to go a long way, I think, for the next few rounds.
And you gotta make hay while the sun is shining, and at a race like this, especially considering it's the second to last of the 1 hour races that we have, considering that we have double points on offer, you really want to try and get the moves done and make up as much ground in that championship as you possibly can. The practice session has been drawn to a close, and I gotta say, one thing that struck my attention was in the Premier category, Matt Hoyland was all the way down in 9th, so for the championship leader, that was not a good time in practice. And as you just brought up a couple of moments ago, Aaron, qualifying going to be super important around this racetrack. There are some overtaking opportunities, primarily turn 1 and probably the hairpin all the way towards the end of the lap. But outside of that, especially in these very big, very heavy, and really tough to drive GT3 race cars, not a whole lot of opportunities to try and get a move done. So if you're Matt Hoyland, the championship leader in the Premier category, despite the fact you have a little bit of a cushion to fall back on, as we've seen from Ashley Brooks in the Evo category, you don't want to use up that cushion too much, because if something were to happen towards the end of the season and you already used up that cushion, you're going to be in for a world of hurt. So even though You're not hoping that you're going to have some sort of chaos strike between now and the end of the season. You got to prepare for all scenarios. So Hoyland being 9th in practice, of course it is a practice session. You got all the cars out there on the racetrack. Same can't be said about this single car qualifying session that we're now in the midst of. I don't have a good feeling about Hoyland, the fact he was that slow in practice. I don't know, maybe that's just me.
Yeah, admittedly, this Montreal track, at least judging by the practice time, seems to have thrown a bit of a spanner in the works. It is a bit of an awkward track to drive these GT3s on. It's not one I don't think we come to often in these cars, so it could be a little bit awkward for some people getting to know this track. I think in iRacing, it's not really used terribly often anyway. But we can take you around this Montreal track with Ryan Oattens. Let's hope that he can at least keep it in a straight line. But so far this season, he's been pretty good at doing that. As he begins his first flying lap, now coming onto the main straight. Like Ron's saying, this is one of the best overtaking opportunities here. Down into turn 1, you want to use as much of the outside track as you possibly can. Then inside on that curb. This next tricky turn 2 is so difficult. The corner goes on for absolutely ages. Wash the car out all the way to the exit. Use all of the track here on the left. Then dart to the inside. Use all of those curbs. Dip a wheel onto the grass on the inside there. Don't hit the wall at turn 4. Flat out through here. Turn 5 just in these cars. Heavy braking once again. Got to use all of that inside curb at turn 6. And then push the car all the way through turn 7. Use the outside curb. And then you've got a tiny little brake in action here. This is part of the middle section of the lap. Has come now down to turn 8 and 9. Probably the most tricky chicane on the track, as the curbs are absolutely lethal through there, and if you get them wrong, you're ending up in the wall, or even worse, the gravel, or another car. Don't want to be doing that. As we head down into the hairpin, difficult in these cars, of course. They've got ABS, so helping them through there. Now full hard on the throttle there. Getting a little bit tail happy was Ryan Oattens coming out of that corner, breaking traction slightly, and then this long back straight where usually slipstream would be important, but in these GT3s it's not as much. So just looking probably fuel saving down here on the brakes once again. Use all of that inside curb once again. Be close to the wall of champions, but not quite hitting it. And then all the way up to the line we come. What's it going to be for Ryan Oattens' first lap? It looked like a decent banker lap. Doesn't look like he was full pushing, and it's a 35 dead. Puts him 3rd in the elite class. Not too bad, but I can imagine he wants to be going much quicker than that.
And thankfully for him, he's got 3 more opportunities to try and get the job done. This 15-minute long qualifying session allows these drivers to have 4 attempts at a lap, and he's certainly going to be using all of them, trying to gain any sort of time that he possibly can. Fairley currently on the provisional pole in the elite category. Bostock, who are following right now on pole, and Evo currently in that McLaren at a 135.802. In the Premier category, it's Stephen Donnelly that's currently on the provisional pole. So looking like the Lamborghinis are surprisingly quick, considering the fact that we have a Lamborghini on pole in Elite and a Lamborghini on a provisional pole in Premier. So maybe these Lamborghinis having a small little advantage around a racetrack like this. It is a somewhat older skin, it must be said. You can tell just based off some of the more Americanized branding. This skin was done back when NASCAR, the Nationwide Series, as it was referred to at the time, was now the NASCAR Xfinity Series, was running here between 2007 all the way up until 2012. So that's part of the reason why you can see some of the GoDaddy branding, some of the Dodge branding as well. So a little bit of an older scan here, and it looks like one of the oldest cars for a GT3 racer to try and choose in the world of iRacing at the moment. A car that is possibly going to get a rescan done in the not too distant future. I heard some rumblings about that. But the Lamborghini looking surprisingly quick here at Montreal.
Yeah, definitely. I think its short wheelbase is definitely helping it round this track. It's just a nice and agile car, and round a small tiny little street circuit like this where it's got a lot of tricky chicanes where you just need to fling the car into the corner. I think the Lamborghini is definitely helping out there, whereas cars like the Merc are probably going to be absolutely suffering around this track. Taking it nice and easy through the last chicane. I don't blame Stephen Donnelly. It is a very tricky corner to get right as he comes across the line. It doesn't look like he was max pushing, but still could be an improvement, albeit a small one. And it doesn't look like he improved that time round. Was just a fraction slower, only about half a tenth on that lap. His Brett Bearings then, currently leading the way in the Premier class in his Porsche. He's looked like one of the favourites for the Premier season this time. And well, can he do anything about it here at Montreal? He definitely is one of the quicker drivers in the Premier class, you would definitely say. And the Porsche does seem to be relatively quick around here. It's probably the second or third fastest car, judging by the times that we've got at the moment. It looks like the Lamborghini could maybe be the quickest. Then it's between the McLaren and the Porsche for second, you definitely say, making his way through the last few corners. If he can improve on his last lap time, that will be something special, as he's currently 6th overall, which is very, very impressive for Bearings. Doesn't improve on that lap, though, and will just stay where he is in 6th place. I think everyone has only got a few more laps left in this qualifying session. Dana Brega's only got one left. Lucchesi has made his way back to the pits, but is going back out again. So we should see another lap time from him. But it is quite a big gap up at the top, you have to say. 3/10 between Fairley and Ruben Bearings. And around a small track like this, that is quite a big margin.
Yeah, it certainly is. A little bit surprising around a racetrack like this, but again, it is very much it's a driver's track whereby a lot of the performance is really in the driver's hands. Got to muscle these cars around the racetrack, hit those curbs with a lot of precision, with a little bit of brutality as well. But nevertheless, those drivers setting some pretty good lap times. Gotta say, despite the fact he's qualified in 4th at the moment, Dana Brega not really feeling too confident in the way his race car is. I haven't talked to him to try and get this information. Just looking at the way he was heading through the first few corners at the beginning of this lap, and considering last time by he was at a 145.0, I think Dana Brega is not very confident in the way that McLaren is driving. Gotta say, in terms of that discussion, is looking at Dana Brega coming down pit lane, so not even going to finish that 4th and final qualifying lap, looking like he may have had a track limits violation coming through one of the earlier corners around this racetrack. That may have been turn 7 that he cut on the inside, but nevertheless, talking about that subject surrounding what car may be the second quickest to the Lamborghini, the fact that Porsche is in the midst of that conversation is really a shock to me, Aaron, because I drive the Porsche in iRacing. That's a one GT3 car that I have, and maybe this driver skill error or what, but whenever I'm driving that Porsche, it just feels like I'm driving a trash bag full of angry lasagna. So the fact that these drivers are managing to wheel that Porsche as well as they are, currently to provisional pole in Premier and Evo, is a little bit of a shock to me.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to agree with you on that. I've never really been that big a fan of the way the Porsche drives, but then again, I've never given it a massive go. I think you definitely have to dial in the setup, and it is very much a driver preference car. And I've never really been a huge fan of the rear engine Porsche. It's just never really suited me an incredible amount. But then again, I do have quite a tame driving style compared to a lot of aggressive driving styles that you tend to see on iRacing. I tend to prefer the more weightier cars, I guess you could say, more front engine. I do like some of the mid-engine cars. I do actually, weirdly, I do quite like the Lambo for some strange reason. It is quite a fun car to fling around everywhere, but I do tend to prefer the cars like the BMW and I would say the Merc, but recently it's just been kind of, yeah, it's not really been a great car to choose. Judging by the way Daniel Lee is performing today, of course, he has been really, really good the last few rounds and currently sits in 12th place. So it really goes to show how much that Mercedes is struggling around here. And I just think, again, those lighter, more agile, short wheelbase cars like the Lamborghini are really, really coming into their own here at Montreal, and the more heavier front engine cars are just struggling a tiny bit more. I think the BMW seems to be the strongest out of all of those types of cars, as Corey Price currently is in second place in the BMW in the Premier class. But yeah, just judging by the times that we've got on the board so far, I would say the Porsche looks like the second quickest so far, and then probably the McLaren third, and then the Ferrari after that, and then the rest of the cars kind of just blur into one another. Like the Corvette doesn't seem too great. The Audi is, just being Audi. The Mercedes is too fat, and kind of same with the BMW. So I think if you're in a Lamborghini, a Porsche, or a McLaren, and maybe a Ferrari, Ryan Oten seems to be going pretty well in it so far, you're going to be loving life around this track.
We'll say it's not too much of a shock that we don't have any Mustangs running around here on account of the fact that your average Mustang GT3 race car weighs about 14 bajillion tons. But nevertheless, looking at this qualifying session slowly drawing to a close is Jean Brainback in the Barbecue Bread Racing 272 car. I'm sure it's probably pronounced BBQ, but my American mind immediately going to autocorrect it to barbecue. Will it be a cooker of a lap time for him, though? Currently slotted in 9th in the elite standings. That was a terrible segue. I would like to wholeheartedly apologize for that. But coming across the line now, is it an improvement on the 135.188? I'm not entirely sure it was, so Brainback going to remain at that position in the elite category. Looking at the other Brainback, here's Marcel Brainback in the 102, the driver in the premier standings, currently 6th at the moment. Lots of Porsches, it must be said, running around this racetrack. Looks like that Porsche is going to be the popular pick, really from this entire season, mind you. One of the great things I love about multi-class sports car racing. I'm not a great sports car driver, I'm more of an open wheel guy myself, but I love commentating sports car racing just because of that dynamic that you brought up, Aaron, about the fact that all these cars have their own unique twists and turns and flares that make them special, make them good at other tracks while they're terrible at others. The Mercedes, it could be a good track at some longer, more flat-out tracks like Le Mans, say, to kick this season off. But around a racetrack like this, it's like trying to wheel around a public bus. Well, with 2 minutes left to go in this qualifying session, looking like it's going to be a Porsche and Lamborghini story here at Montreal.
Yeah, if only we had more Lamborghinis, then I think it would be, a little bit more even. I mean, mainly, it could be that Andrew is just an absolute weapon today in that Lamborghini, and everyone else in the Porsche should be going quicker than him. But he looks absolutely rapid today in that thing, and it looks like he will get provisional pole at the moment, as I don't think anyone else is really on a competitive lap time. And I've just looked as well, and Andrew didn't even complete all of his laps. I don't think he might have gotten an off track on that last one, but even still, he's nearly 2 tenths ahead of Lucchesi, which is very, very impressive considering how they've all been going so far this season. And I'm also curious. Breitenbach has used up all of his laps, I think, so maybe he's just getting some extra practice in. I know a lot of drivers on their last qualifying lap practice pit entry, which is a lot more important than you think it is, because we've seen a few times this season, I think it was Barcelona, one of the drivers smashing into the tyre barrier on pit entry. And this track, it's more about getting the speed right, the braking right. It's not necessarily the entry that's difficult, but just maximizing the amount of speed that you can take into the pit lane is so important, because that can gain you a couple tenths, and those few tenths might just be enough to put you ahead of whoever you're racing against. But is Breitenbach coming into the pits? No, he's just choosing to do another lap. I mean, I could be wrong, and this lap is going to count. We're going to find out together as he comes across the line. Is it actually going to be an improvement for Marcel Breitenbach? No, it's not. It's not going to be an improvement, and I think he just was getting some extra practice in.
I mean, practice makes perfect, especially in a series like this, which is oh so competitive. That pit entry, we're going to have to talk about that for sure. The pit exit as well, going to be a pretty big trouble spot for these drivers in the 1 hour of racing action that we have coming up right about now. Gonna get the starting grid load up for you for this third of 4 1 hour long races here from the Evolution Sim Racing GT3 Championship. And it's going to be Andrew Fairley starting this race from a pole, the ADX Racing Esports 246 car. He's currently currently 12th in the elite standings, has not had a very good season, but looking to try and turn things around here and kick off the second half of the season in very good fashion. Luke Lucchesi going to join him on the front row. Ruben Behrens going to be starting right behind in third. Tristan Denabrega going to be starting in fourth, looking to try and hold on to that championship lead, with his teammate being the main driver that he has to keep his eyes on. That's another South African in the form of Ryan Oden starting this race in fifth. Luke Van Gortel going to join him on that third row. Starting this race from the premier pole in P7 overall is going to be Bert Behrens. Tom Weston in the 201 car going to join him on that row. Luke King going to be starting in 9th. John Brain back in 10th. Corey Price in 11th. Daniel Lee in P13. Francois Brandet off the back of a victory in Evo 1 week ago at Interlagos. He's going to be starting this race at Montreal from the Evo pole, P13 overall. Joe Glass going to be starting in 14th. Alex Fretwell in 15th. Matt Hoyland with a disappointing qualifying result going to be starting this race in P16. Stefano Gattuso, who won in the elite category for the last race of the season at race 2 at Interlagos, he's going to be starting this race all the way down in 17th. Darren Sharples in 18th, my apologies. Dean Powell going to be starting at 19th, and Marcel Brainback going to round out your top 20.
Oh, the rest of the grid does have a tiny bit of catching up to do. Stefan Donnelly is the first of those drivers going to hopefully make their way further up the field. He's in 21st, another Lamborghini driver in this field. James Bostock 22nd, Thomas Pugh 23rd, Chris Jennings in 24th place, Robin Noel Brown 25th, Cole Schlaw in 26th, Maxim in 27th, Brooks in 28th, Coates 29th, Peter Black in 30th place, Victor Van Zeest in 31st, Nick Stube in 32nd place, Sarek de Slesser in 33rd, Ludbrook in 34th, Koch in 35th, Rob McKee in 36th, Allmans in 37th, Gareth Newton in 38th, Chris Keenan 39th, Jonathan Provost starts in 40th place, and then it's Rolls Turf Crewer 41st, Danny Weir 42nd, Van der Meer in 43rd, Sean Clark in 44th, Jeffrey Darman in 45th, and Joe Sparza not setting a time in 46th place. Should see him coming through the field.
And he's had a pretty rough start to this season. The reigning premier champion has had it rough, but looking to try and end off the first half of the season and maybe hit the ground running into the second half. But nevertheless, you could see the field going down the back straightaway. That's to head their way off into the chicane at the end of this lap. Don't want to end up in the wall of champions, while some drivers having to gun it heading through that corner. Would not be shocked if we have an incident at the very beginning of this race. But ready to get things up and rolling for the 5th race of this season at Montreal. We got 1 hour of racing action to look forward to here on Apex Racing TV. A full field of GT3 race cars and are ready to rock and roll. The green flag is out. We have to wait a little bit until the drivers can gun it. They have to wait until that start-finish line until they can get going. But you can see the field is on their way, heading down into turn number 1. You can see they're going side by side. Some drivers battling already. Got to say, pretty rough start for Robin Noel Brown. Corey Maxim dropping down some spots as well. Looking at the front, though, all things are sort of jumbled up at this early stage. You can see some battling heading off through turn number 1, but surprisingly so, Aaron, looks like most of the field is having a pretty good start to the race.
Yeah, just want to apologise as well. Looks like we're having some technical difficulties with the cameras at the moment. We'll try to get those back up to speed for you. But at the moment, we can watch some battling further back the field. It looks like it's been a relatively clean start for everyone so far, although there is a car off there. I wonder who that is. Don't tell me that's Denabrega. I'm worried that could be the man possibly fighting for a championship. I'm not sure. It was one of the McLarens. So we'll keep a close eye on that. Where is Denabrega? I'm just trying to look through. He has lost a lot of places. He is down 17 places. I don't know what on earth has happened to him. A couple drivers have had some issues. Ruben Behrens as well is another driver who's had an awful start. So, while I thought it was a clean start at first, there has been some small incidents involving some drivers, perhaps some slowdowns at some point. But Behrens, one of the sort of championship contenders, and Denabrega both having huge issues at the start of this race.
Yeah, Denabrega entering this race with the championship lead. It has been a really tough start for him. Looking at the front, though, Andrew Fairley leading it over Luke Lucchesi. Luke Lucchesi looking to try and capitalize on the misfortune that has befallen his teammate. That was a disastrous start for him. That McLaren going to be well farther down in the field. You can see a battle, though, a little bit farther in the back. That's Thomas Pugh in the Axis Esports 216 car, running 14th at the moment in the elite category, battling hard with some Lamborghinis and some more McLarens around him, side by side, heading off through the corner. That is some hard-fought fight. That is himself going side by side. Thomas Pugh going side by side with Stephen Donnelly. So the premier driver trying to make hay while the sun is shining. He's currently made up 5 spots at the very early stages of this race. Looking at the leader in the Evo category, that being Francois Brandet. Some side by side action right behind him, though. That was close. Not sure who that was right behind him.
Ruben
Trying to figure out
Barrington
exactly
Hoyland.
who that was. Maybe. Yeah, Hoyland trying to make up some position. So Hoyland, and we mentioned this point earlier on, as some side-by-side battling heading down into the hairpin. Denabrega trying to make up some spots, but we brought up that point earlier on in this broadcast during the qualifying session, Aaron, actually before the qualifying session for that matter, about Hoyland not showing off a whole lot of pace, but he's trying to make up some moves because at this point in time, that's really all he can do.
Yeah, exactly. He just has to make ground as much as he can, take those opportunities, and especially considering some of the elite cars have had some trouble, that does not surprise me whatsoever. Here's Daniel Lee going wheel to wheel with Brayton back through turn 1. That's getting awfully close. They leave each other mountains of room. Daniel Lee nearly cutting the first chicane. He left that much room, but still managed to hold on to that 7th place. I can't imagine it's too easy in that Mercedes, but he's just about making it work. He is currently in I believe 9th overall, so not too horrible. 7th in his own class, as Brecht Behrens and Corey Price are doing a fantastic job in the Premier class, respectively. They're mixing it in with some of the elite drivers, and potentially, you know, in future seasons, we could see them in the elite class, definitely deserving of it so far this season, as Andrew Fairley's still leading the way. And I can't imagine that Lucchesi will actually want to get past. I think this first half of the race is just going to be about fuel saving, to be honest. And then once we come to the pit stops, I imagine Andrew Fairley will have a bit of a rougher time. He definitely will have a longer pit stop than the cars around him. And then, well, unless he can pull a gap away, I suspect he might drop back as we're going 3 wide coming out of the hairpin.
Good lord, the drivers in the ESR GT3 championship always trying to find some sort of way to spike my blood pressure. 3 wide coming out of the hairpin. I don't think so. The fact they managed to go through the kink on corner exits without coming to blows is an absolute miracle. A little bit of contact heading down into the braking zone for the final chicane. Comes with the chicane in question. Ooh, and a little bit of contact, I think a little bit farther in the back. I think Marcel Brainback may have had a little bit of drama with himself and the Lamborghini that is going side by side with, or was going side by side with, of Paul Colashaw. That was a close call coming out of the corner. But that kind of sort of contact, not sure what happened there a couple of moments ago. That sort of contact is what should be expected, heading down into one of the heaviest braking zones around this racetrack. Despite the fact it's a heavy braking zone, though, you just don't want to go for a move because it'll end in disaster for the both of you. Side by side with Robin Noel Brown and the Kaizen GP2 Porsche trying to get a move done. He's currently running 4th at the moment in the Evo category. Evo quite spread out at the moment with 4 seconds between Brandet in the lead and Bostock in P2. And you have to go a little bit farther back to Brooks and Noel Brown. That Brooks and Noel Brown fight, though, is the one that we're definitely going to keep our eyes on. Those two essentially in the championship, well, either in the championship lead or right behind in P2. I think they're going to try and battle with each other in the not-too-distant future.
Potentially, yes. And this is kind of what we get in the Evo class. We've seen it time and time again this season. That's, you know, the field seems to be incredibly spread out. And, you know, drivers like Brandon and Brooks always seem to be right at the top, just pulling away from everyone. And, well, not too different today. It's already 15 seconds between the top 5 drivers. As, hello, I think we've just gotten a move for the lead of this race, as Lucchesi has made his way into first. It looks like that was a move into turn 1, potentially, or just coming out of the chicane. might have been a mistake from Andrew Fairley. We'll take a look, and I think it was. That did not look like a good exit for Andrew at all. He went bouncing over those curbs, and yes, he's had to slow right down there. And it's just let Lucchesi go right on through. Potentially, maybe, he could be a little bit strategic there, choosing not to fight it. And like I was saying a lap ago, Andrew's obviously got to worry about the fuel, but has dropped off quite massively, actually, on this lap. From Lucchesi, it's almost a second already as we head into the third part of the lap, as Brayton back now trying to fight his way past everyone in front of him. He's got Francois Brandet behind him, the leader in the Evo class. He's done brilliantly so far in this race, of course, bouncing off of his first win in Interlagos. Now is doing an absolutely stellar job. Way ahead of Bostock, 5 seconds already, and is about, I think, 8 places ahead of him, and that is a huge margin in one class. He's got a big old buffer to play for here, and he can just relax, I think, for probably the next 20-30 minutes.
And that's a fantastic position to put yourself in the very early stages of this race. As we've seen get put on full display over the first 8 minutes, these races can get incredibly hectic, so to pull a gap like that, and it's not just the gap time-wise, he's also got a big cushion in terms of the cars between himself and Bostock, so Francois Brandet putting himself in a very good position as it stands at the moment. Ruben Behrings getting a move put on him by Tristan Dennebrega, still making his way up the running order. He's now running in 9th in the elite category, but Dennebrega, as much as he can gain a whole lot of points at a race like this, he can also lose out on a whole lot of points like this. I mentioned earlier on it was a very strange choice of vernacular for me, but I think there's no other way to describe it. Regardless of how that falling anvil hits you on the head, if you're the one with the dent, you're going to be the one feeling it. And Dennebrega running into that same issue yet again, as Joe Glass getting a fantastic move done around the outside, heading through turn number 5 into the 6 and 7 chicane towards the start of the second sector around this lap, and still side by side, heading down the back, not so straight away under the bridge into the 8 and 9 chicane. Looks like Ruben Berry is going to get that move done back in front of him to slip his way up another position overall, remaining P10 in the elite category.
I think it was actually Joe Klaas who went really slow. It looked like he might have picked up a slowdown at some point as he lost a few places. We saw Dennebrega make his way past, and then Ruben Behrings got stuck right behind him for those few corners, and it's cost Ruben Behrings about a second to Dennebrega, so he's got some work to do to catch back up to the cars in front. And, well, it looks like a lot of drivers in this race have got a lot of work to do in terms of fuel saving, position catching, and of course Behrings and Dennebrega still got a long way to go in this race, as Brandes has now lost a place to Dennebrega, but I can't imagine he was fighting that one too much, as Matt Hoyland now is under pressure from said Dennebrega, and Tristan is on a move right now, and I've just heard as well in game chat that Matt Hoyland has just let Dennebrega pass with ease. I don't think these drivers are really going to fight Tristan too much. They know how rapid he's been so far this season. They know probably how angry he is at the start of this race. So they do not want to mess with a driver like him, who's hot on his heels, seeing the red mist a little bit today, and, well, trying to make his way back up to some competitive places. And he's currently sitting in 11th, so it's difficult to predict where he'll be able to get up to. It really depends all on how good his pit stop goes. If it can go well and fairly similar to the cars around him, I say maybe a top 5 for Dennebrega, potentially. Maybe a bit optimistic.
I certainly wouldn't rule it out, though. Anything can happen in these races, as we're taking a look at a replay involving XT Cyan car. So what in the world went on there a couple of moments ago, but nevertheless, I think this replay may be slightly glitched out from my perspective. Aaron, can you talk us through this?
Yes, it's just a huge checkup of cars coming out the 8 and 9 chicane there. And it's a couple other cars behind as well got involved in that. I think there was about 3 cars there who made contact with one another. Rob McKee ended up spinning around because of it. And that's really unfortunate. We can take one more look at it. And now Now my replay's bugged, but luckily we have a backup, so quickly gonna try and go on it. As, yeah, all the cars checking up. Big damage there, and then I think there's some cars coming through. Yeah, one of the cars loses it coming out of turn 9. And just got tapped up the rear. So that's about 2 or 3 cars there, probably with some big damage. And, well, Ron McKee, obviously one of them. Hello, we're getting some wheel-to-wheel action. This is Francois Brandet, defending quite aggressively from Ruben Behrings. Quite a surprise. That's a bit deep, though, Francois. He's gone wide over the curb. And Ruben Behrings, getting a tank slapper, just about keeping it on the road. But he's lost some ground once again. That got super close. And Francois clearly not wanting to lose any track position whatsoever. Really trying to keep that buffer going. And that's more contact. That's Gattuso and Ruben Behrings. And one of the Lamborghinis as well. That might be Stefan Donnelly and Stefan Gattuso. Huge damage on that Ferrari as he tries to spin it back round. There's a Lamborghini up the road you can see going very slow. I think that is Stefan Donnelly. And that is hugely unfortunate. Actually, no, my apologies. It's Alex Fretwell who's the Lamborghini going super slow. And Gattuso is going to be absolutely fuming with that one. That was a very awkward few corners there. And here's the aftermath of it, of course, where Gattuso just left helpless facing the wrong way. And, well, we're going back down into turn 10. Nearly 3 wide. The McLaren up the inside, getting very close. And then...
3 wide on corner exit. That's just an absolute recipe for disaster. Aaron, I don't know if you ever got this feeling, whether it be driving this track in iRacing or driving on like a Formula 1 video game, but coming out of the corner, it feels like the exit is so narrow. So we're going to be taking a look at this perspective from Stefano Gattuso's angle. Oh, that is just messy. That is the only way that you can describe it. A messy incident from start to finish, and you can see her nearly getting hit by a Ferrari who is coming into the scene of the accident and nearly ran into the front of him. Gotta say, Stefano Gattuso still running out on the racetrack without a front bumper, and more importantly, without a front splitter. That car is driving like an absolute hoopty-rod at this point in time. But Aaron, we've seen incidents like that basically with that replay and the incident that we just had a couple of moments ago that I feel like can only happen at a racetrack like this, considering it is technically a street circuit. You get some close quarter stuff. Speaking of close quarter stuff, side by side, Brain back looking to try and get a move done. Very close to contact with himself and Tristan Denabrega. So it looks like Denabrega, as much as he was getting the good end of the deal with some drivers that he had to overtake, now running into a bit more of a fight back as Brainback trying to get some moves done on him. Those two battling for P7 at the moment in the elite category. But getting back to the point I was going to mention a few moments ago there, Aaron, I think an incident like that can only really happen around a racetrack like this because it is technically a street circuit.
Yeah, I'm very much inclined to agree with you. The corner exit very much narrows up a few corners on this track. And of course, the hairpin is probably the most obvious one when it comes to thinking about it, as that is Alex Fretwell getting out of the way there of our race leaders. And Andrew Fairley has managed to stay with Lucchesi, so it looks like when he initially got past, maybe he was a little bit dazed, but has managed to get his momentum back and is right on the back of Lucchesi, and I can imagine he'll stay there for a long time. But that incident that we saw just a lap ago, that kind of started a few corners back as we saw Ruben Behrings getting a bit of a tank slapper. I think he made contact with one of the cars behind. Lost a few places, was desperately trying to get them back in the hairpin, tried to get the cutback on Gattuso, and as the corner narrows up as you come out of it, yeah, 3 wides just did not go there, and all 3 of them suffering because of it. And, well, Alex Fretwell on the outside was definitely the innocent bystander in all of that, as he had to come in for damage in the end, as we've got some cars ahead fighting into the last chicane. And although it's one of the better overtaking opportunities on the track, it's probably one of the more difficult ones, to be fair, as, well, going too wide into the chicane is just ill-advised, as Maxim getting a little bit on the grass there around the outside, but keeping it on the road, which is the most important part. currently fighting with Thomas Pugh is the car in front. And then it's Ashley Brooks in front of him, who's currently third in Evo, not having as good of a time as he usually does. We're used to Ashley being right at the front of the field. But today, maybe just doesn't quite have the pace. I think the McLaren is a bit more of a struggle around this track than it has been at previous weeks. I'm definitely thinking it is about the third or maybe even fourth quickest car around this Montreal street circuit. As Corey really is trying to find that gap on Thomas Pugh, but just nothing doing around here on this really tight and narrow street circuit. But they're both getting a bit squirrely coming out of the 8 and 9 chicane. And that's just what you got to do at Montreal and other street circuits. You kind of have to make your own space sometimes. You have to put your car in places that maybe you're a bit uncomfortable with doing. And just try and scare your opponent into going for a move, making a mistake. And, well, that's how most people usually try and overtake round here anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point that you bring up there, Aaron. You just have to go for the moves and make hay while the sun is shining. There may not be a gap, but you just got to try and go for it at any sort of opportunity that you can. Looks like Corey Maxim going to make a little bit of contact coming out of the corner. That was a big checkup with himself and the driver that he's battling with, that being Thomas Pugh. And you can see Robin O'Brown looking to follow along with Malcolm Coates. So Pugh having a terrible time of things at the end of that lap. He just got it mega loose and mega sideways, had a killer curb whack heading through the final chicane, and it's going to lose him a whole lot of time. Now side by side nearly involving Corey Maxim and Robin Noel Brown. Noel Brown currently running as the 4th place car in the Evo category. He's still putting together a pretty good race though, running 21st overall, up 4 positions where he started in this race, and may try and break his way up into the overall top 20 in the not too distant future. But Maxim, with that little bit of contact with himself and Pugh coming out of that final chicane, I'm curious if there's a little bit of contact on the front of that McLaren, because it looked like a pretty significant tap.
Yeah, it did. It looks like a bigger whack than it did. Oh yeah, that was a big old bump up the back, and that could potentially, well, I mean, he might have gotten away without any significant damage, but any harder and that could have been a suspension broken. I mean, I actually think he did just
avoid contact.
I think he did. I think Corey Maxim just did enough to avoid contact there. And Thomas Pugh very much grateful for it, as the back of his McLaren looking sparkly clean still. And I think he just backed off because he just didn't want the smoke, to be honest. I just think he was a bit scared, didn't really want to get involved in this battle too much. And smartly, I think, just backing off a bit. I think something has happened to Francois Brandet while we were looking at this. Yes, it has, as James Bostock as well. Just taking a look on our live timing screen, something has happened to Bostock at least. As Brandet is still in the lead. I think Bostock might have gotten wide into turn 1 and cut the chicane and had to let everyone by again. We'll take a look. As this is Bostock in the McLaren going up the inside of Francois Brandet, and it's a big whack.
You can see some contact at the outside tire barrier as well for James Bostock. The driver, the number 66 Kane GP2 McLaren, was putting on such a good show. He was running 2nd in the Evo category, tried to get a move done on Francois Brandet to slip his way up into the lead. However, it is all unraveled for him. He's now, I believe, completely at the top 5 in class at the moment. Gotta take a look at another angle of this time riding on board with the DXT Magenta number 28 machine of Francois Brandet.
That's on
Brandet. That was entirely on Brandet. I think that was a move of desperation, trying to stick it down the inside into turn number 2. He saw his chances of leading this race disappear in front of his very eyes. So as a result of it, went for a move that just was never on, trying to retake the lead. Tough break though, because that is going to break up that Evo fight a little bit. It brings in the championship leaders of Brooks and Noel Brown into a P2 and P3 spots, so they're certainly not going to be minding that one bit. However, Brandet with that contact, looking to try and see if there's any sort of damage on the front end of that number 28 Porsche. Certainly for the sake of the driver that he hit, you would kind of hope so. But looking through, I think that the front end of that Porsche is surprisingly clean as we're taking a look at a replay of an incident involving Darren Sharples, the old dudes in cars number 277 McLaren heading through the chicane. And this quick little spin heading through the corner, going to have to take a detour through the grass. Off the New Jersey 578-point turn. Now he's able to keep it going in the right direction after getting turned around, but losing out on a whole lot of time heading through that hairpin. And Aaron, honestly, talking about the corners we have around this racetrack, 14 in all, I have a feeling that hairpin in these GT3 race cars is probably the hardest turn around this entire circuit.
I think it's very difficult to name a specific difficult corner since they're all... Hello, that's a Lamborghini getting very close to Dean Powell there. That's Stefan Donnelly, who I think maybe missed a braking marker there, nearly ran into the back of him, but he managed to avoid contact just about. But it's difficult to name a difficult corner on this track because they're all difficult. There's not one easy goer. There's not one tiny little flat out kink. It's very easy. No, they're all difficult, tight chicanes as Stefan Donnelly waxed the wall of champions. I think he's gotten away with it though. And if I was to name the most difficult on this track, God, it is really difficult actually. Maybe turn 8 and 9, I think. I think turn 3 and 4 as well, this next chicane as well is a contender, as it is quite easy to whack yourself into the outside wall and give yourself some easy suspension damage. But I think turns 8 and 9 for me, just the way you have to use the curbs and the way you have to get on the power, the closeness of the wall on the outside. This is the next chicane that I'm talking about, by the way. We'll go through it with you. This is what I think is the most difficult corner on the track, as it's big old curbs and trying to wash out all the way to the outside. I think it's a bit easier in these GT3 cars just purely because they can take that curb. But if you're in something like a Formula 3 or something a bit lower, as that's Stefan Donnelly again, looking up the inside and nearly whacking Francois Brendet up the bum once again. He's nearly done that 2 laps in a row and just avoids it again. He's now got Marcel Brayton back right behind him, and this is going to be for position. This is for 5th in Premier. This could heat up, actually, if they're not careful. Stefan Donnelly choosing the inside line through the last chicane. I think Brayton back was being a bit tame through there, as I think a lot of drivers have either been involved or seen a lot of incidents already today, and some of them taking it a bit easy. And just one more thing as well. Fairley has gotten back into the lead and has pulled away. 1.5 seconds. He's absolutely left it, as that's Ruben Bearings going very, very slow there.
Yeah, Bearings incredibly slow coming out of the first 2 corners around this racetrack. Looks like he's up to speed now, so maybe just some sort of slowdown penalty. Trying to get a move done heading down into turn number 6 and 7. Looked like near disaster for Brainback. Looked like he just about hit the wall. Looking like a little bit of damage on the front end of Ruben Bearings' 251 DDK by Eagle Speed Academy car. So not sure exactly what happened to him. Take a look at battle continuing here all through turn number 8 and 9, and honestly, I'm with you there, Aaron. That chicane is so difficult, especially with the bridge entering the corner. Trying to get the braking zone right is so difficult, and with that runoff area as well, the area there, it was like half asphalt, half gravel. Then they went full asphalt on, and I think as of the past few years, they recently changed it to be back to grass and gravel. But that section is so difficult. Gonna take a look at a replay of the move that got Fairley the lead of the race yet again, heading down into the turn 10 chicane. Commitment from him there. He gets the move done.
Well, he did get it done, but not with ease. A little bit of contact between himself and Lucchesi, and has pulled away. 2 seconds now, 2.1 as it goes up ever more. Couple drivers coming into the pits now as well. Ruben Bearings is in, Robin Noel Brown, Chris Jennings as well. Luke Van Gortel was one of the drivers who came in. but I think something might have happened to him as he was running actually fairly well. I think he was in about 6th or 7th place at one point. So something has happened to the MJK Sim Racing car, and I think he has fully towed back. I think he's got big damage on his car as getting some early stoppers in this lap. I'm not surprised Ruben Behrings is one of them, as we saw he has big damage on his Porsche. No more as he comes back out onto the track. All the way down I'm trying to find him now. He's disappeared. He's 29th, so got a bit of work to do, has Ruben Behrings, and I think we should probably see some other drivers coming in within the next, I want to say 5 or 10 minutes. He's still got damage in that car, so I don't think these guys get fast repairs. I thought they did, but come on.
Yeah, so Behrings still out there with a battered machine. I gotta say, I think we do have fast repairs in this series unless something has changed over the past few weeks. So this is odd for sure. Yeah, according to my notes, 1 fast repair for this series, so not sure why Ruben Behrings decided not to take it. Maybe he's already come down in the pits, then picked up that damage. Not entirely sure, but nevertheless, he is going to be on the back foot throughout the rest of this race. Looking at a fight involving Ashley Brooks and Thomas Pugh heading down into turn number 1. Looks like he's going to hold off the challenge as it stands at the moment. Brooks in that McLaren running second, and look at Malcolm Coates nearly trying to go for a move on Pugh heading down into turn number 2. That looked like full commitment from the driver of the 121 Corvette, currently running 6th at the moment in the Premier category, but Brooks at this point in time still losing touch with the front-running car in Evo of Brandit. And I'm curious what exactly has happened to Robin Noel Brown. He was running 2nd not terribly long ago.
He went in the pits.
Has he made that decision to come down pit lane? I guess he has. So a little bit of an anticlimax there. He has come into the pits, spent about 17 seconds, stopped in his pit stall, about 33.5 seconds down pit lane. That's briefly giving P2 to Brooks, and I'm curious if Brooks is going to be able to leapfrog in front of him. Looks like he's slowly reeling in that gap to himself and Brandet. That or Brandet running into some difficulties on this lap. That gap has gone down by about 0.8 of a second thus far on the 19th lap of this race. So maybe Francois Brandet just dealing with some trouble up in front of him. That, I believe, is Stephen Donnelly in the Premier Lamborghini right in front of him. So maybe getting slowed down a little bit, but either way, that gap in Evo still a little bit comfortable if you are Francois Brandet.
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, we saw him made that contact earlier on, and I can imagine he will probably getting a penalty for it later on after this race, as, like we said, that was a bit of a move of desperation from Brandet, and a bit unfortunate. Would have been nice to see a battle for the Evo. Stefan Gattuso comes into the pits as, yeah, he has a fast repair. So what on earth was Ruben Behrings do? I don't know. Some people confuse me. Maybe he deselected it by accident. I'm not sure. But yeah, Behrings is really going to be suffering because of that now. As Gattuso, of course, the other driver that was involved when Ruben Behrings got his damage, and Stefan has now repaired his and should be good to go. Back out on track comes the Italian, and well, you know, the tale of 2 weeks, isn't it? You know, gets his first race win last week at Interlagos and is currently in 28th. Not been a great day for Stefan, has it?
Yeah, from jubilation 1 week ago for race 2 at Interlagos to absolute despair here at Montreal. In that fight, though, involving Alex Fretwell, he's running 12th at the moment in the Premier category, trying to get a move done, heading down into the first corner. The driver he was battling with was Sean Clark, running 10th in the Evo category, the DXT Emerald entry, number 68. Running a little bit farther in the back, the last car is still out there on the racetrack at the moment in the Evo category, with Weir and Bostock running into some difficulties, being 5 laps down and 11 laps down respectively. So Bostock, this has been a disastrous turn of events for him, as we're seeing Ashley Brooks come down pit lane. So the driver, the number 19, entering this race with the championship lead in the Evo category, had a pretty rough go of things for race 2 at Interlagos. Walked away from that race with an 11th place finish in class, which is pretty much stone dead last. So Ashley Brooks looking to try and turn things around. He has a clean sweep of the races thus far, outside of a 9th place finish earlier on in the season, an 11th place run 1 week ago at Interlagos. Looking at this fight though, Malcolm Coates going to get out in front of him, so I think Brooks spending a bit more longer time stopped in his pit stall than he probably had in mind. Let's see how things shake out compared to him and Brandet, who's still going to stay out for another lap.
Yeah, getting a lot of early stoppers in this race, and every single time I've tried to predict when these guys have to come in, it's always been wrong. So of course I'm going to do it again. I suspect that these guys can probably go for about 40 minutes, judging by what we've seen in these 1 hour races, but we are getting some people who are coming into the pits early, perhaps maybe stuck in a bit of traffic and just trying to avoid it and get into some clean air. And some other drivers maybe picking up some damage and wanting to get that fixed as well without losing any more time. And I think it's just a mishmash of situations for different drivers. But I still stand by the fact that running all the way until the tank is dry is one of the best things you can do. As well, there comes Francois Brandes from the lead of the Evo, the first leader in our classes to make a pit stop as he comes down pit road. And a big old pit lane here, surprisingly, considering how short it is in real life. Enough to hold 46 cars. I don't think that's happening in real life, as I think he's gone up on the jacks, interestingly enough. I don't know how many other people have chosen to take tyres today, so we'll wait and see if that's the correct decision from Francois, as I don't think anyone else I've seen has taken tyres, so he's gotten away with it though. I think he has taken probably 2 sets of tyres, either on the front or the rear of the car. And will that pay off for the Frenchman? I can imagine some other people might have done it as well. We were not paying attention probably. But he's come out in 4th and not too far behind Ludbrook actually, who is still yet to make his pit stop.
I gotta say, even with the fact that his car went up on the jacks during that pit stop, Francois Brandet still spent about 7/10 of a second less down pit lane compared to Ashley Brooks. Seeing Daniel Lee come down pit lane in the 271 car, so this is an interesting call for him. Matt Hoyland from the lead in Premier, he's now coming into the pits, the championship leader in the Premier category coming down pit lane. Let's see how things shake out with him. Getting back to that point, touching on Brandet coming down pit lane. Look at that, in terms of the time they spent in the pit stall, identical between the two of them. That looks like the same call. Gotta say, as we're riding on board with Brandet's race car going down pit lane, looked like it had a small little bit of suspension damage on that race car. Thankfully, we do have fast repair for these drivers to use, so I think he's already gotten that taken care of. Speaking of getting taken care of, Lee already out of the pits and away. He's going to be careening his way down through the pit exit into turn number 2, which is oh so difficult on cold tires with cold brakes as well. I think these drivers are very happy about the fact that we don't have any adverse weather conditions. Otherwise, this pit exit would just be so tough. The pit entry is difficult as well, and considering the fact that we may see the likes of Fairley and Lucchesi along with Odins and King come in not terribly long from now, I think we should probably bring back that subject and talk about the pit entry. I could best compare it, I know it's definitely an apples to broccoli comparison, but I can best compare it to a pit lane entry very similar to like Indianapolis Motor Speedway, for instance. If you're running practice at the Indy 500 or watching practice for the Indy 500 every single May, you'll see those drivers try and practice their entry coming into the pits, because there's been some times in the past in which a driver's race has been completely ruined as a result of a pit lane speeding penalty. Happened to Scott Dixon a couple of years ago. It can happen to these drivers as well around this racetrack. We were coming in like a badass hell, need to drop the anchors as quickly as you can. Tristan Dennebrega now come down pit lane in the RDSA number 270 McLaren. Let's see how his stop goes, stopping in his box right now, running in 6th at the moment. I'm curious how things are going to shake out with him and the rest of the drivers that were running inside the top 5, but Dennebrega looking to be on the up and up after a mistake earlier on.
Yeah, he has made a pretty good comeback so far in this race. He's made up a lot of time. His pit stop has been quite long though, admittedly, compared to some other drivers around him. Was about 3 seconds longer than Daniel Lee, one of the cars who he was fighting. as he comes out back onto the track. He's now behind Matt Hoyland. So he's lost about 2 seconds to Daniel Lee there. And I believe he was ahead of him when they made their pit stop. So perhaps the undercuts here at Montreal could be the way to go, judging by what we've just seen. And we've seen about half and half of drivers taking tyres, the other half not. I think some of the more experienced drivers seem to be taking tyres. Some other drivers choosing to be a bit safe, as Stefan Donnelly was one of the cars who didn't take tyres. And of course, we don't know what tyres drivers have taken. We don't know if it's front or rear. I can imagine probably it will be rear tyres since this track is more traction focused. If we were at a higher speed track, then they'd probably take fronts. So I suspect it's going to be 2 new sets of rear Michelins for the entire field, or more or less the entire field, as Joe Class is currently leading the way in the Premier class. He hasn't come in for his pit stop as of yet, and the highest up driver in the Premier class that has, I believe, is Matt Hoyland, who's currently in 12th, about 21 seconds behind, as he's just come back into the pits. No, that's Van Ziest. Never mind.
I think he may have made a run to come down to the pits. That area had some sort of issue because he is dropping his way down the running order quite a lot. So
yeah,
Matt
he is.
Yeah, not sure what in the world has gone on with Hoyland in the past few moments. This is going to be disastrous for the time that entered this race with the championship lead. Oh, is it some sort of issue? I think it may be. Has he just completely been sucked up into a UFO? Oh, that's going to be a heartbreaker for him. But as we mentioned earlier on, pretty big gap in the points standings. Entered this race with the championship lead off the back of 3 straight victories and 77 points between himself and Nick Stube. So not going to hurt him out too terribly much in the championship fight. However, that's going to hurt him out a lot. Luke Lucchesi coming into the pits along with Ryan Oden, so 2 of the heavy hitters in the elite category, making that run to come into the pits. And I think both of them are up on the jack, so I think you may be right here, Aaron. Some drivers going for the 2 tires that they can take in these pit stops without losing out on any sort of time. I'm curious, though, one driver that may lose out on some time is our race leader, Fairley. I think he has to come down pit lane next time by. He just has to.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think he'll be able to go another lap before running out of time. Speaking of time, Lucchesi has potentially gotten a speeding penalty, and we were just talking about it. It can cost you. He's been in the pit stop for nearly 50 seconds now. Something has happened to Luke Lucchesi, and it looks like it's going to be a speeding penalty or something along the lines for him, and he's losing a huge amount of time. And the man who we've talked about being so consistent so far this season, he's only just coming out now, and he's all the way down in 13th place. That's an absolute disaster for Lucchesi.
That is just about the worst case scenario we mentioned. He's got some traffic to deal with as well. That's going to make it even worse. Nearly running into the back of the car right in front of him. That, I believe, is Brainback right in front. That was a near disaster with those 2 cars heading down into the 3 and 4 chicane. It was Marcel Brainback on the 102 Porsche right in front of him. But Luke Lucchesi in the 224 Porsche, bringing up the point that we mentioned, Aaron, about that pit entry. It is so difficult. You're on the ragged edge of control, locking up those tires, which you can't really do in a GT3 race car, but just trying to carry as much momentum as you possibly can. Lundberg trying to get a move done down into the 8 and 9 chicane. That was some very close stuff, but he makes that move stick. The current leader in the Evo category, Scott Lundberg, having a pretty good run of things at the moment. Gotta say, he's yet to come down into the pit, so he's not in the lead of the Evo category on merit and merit alone. But that was near disaster with Lucchesi and Brainback right as Lucchesi was exiting pit lane, but that is just about as worse how things could have gone for him. It's going to be music to the ears of his teammate Tristan Denabrega, considering the fact that those 2 were separated by 2 points. looked like Lucchesi was going to be in contention for the victory. Dena Brega looked like he was going to have to settle for a P5 result, or even worse for that matter. But with all of that, it has certainly given Dena Brega something to believe. Going to be riding on board with Fairley as he makes the run to come down pit lane. Going to try and exercise a bit of caution. Looks like he was able to get into the pit in convincing fashion, not picking up any sort of penalty. He is clear on pit entry, so here comes our overall race leader of Fairley.
Well, let's hope he can have a better time of it than Lucchesi did, as he is going to stop on his marks right about now. There you go, and he is not taking tyres. Interesting. This is what I mean about half and half. Some drivers choosing to take them, some drivers not. And if I'm being completely honest, you would not expect a Lamborghini V10 to be the most fuel-efficient car on the grid. And there you go, 15 seconds! How on earth has he done that? I mean, even some of the drivers who we've seen not take tyres have not been as quick as that. That is surprisingly quick and almost suspicious, in fact. What on earth has Andrew Fairley been doing these past few laps? 15 seconds! That's about 7 or 8 seconds quicker on average than the rest of the field. Okay, well, I mean, if that works out for him, then fair play. He didn't need to do that because he has a huge gap behind now, but I don't know if he knows what's happened to Lucchesi. He probably does now because he's wondering where on earth is he. But yeah, he did not have to make that short of a pit stop. So we'll see in about 17 minutes time if that was the correct decision for Andrew Fairley.
You know what? I'm going to make a very bold assumption. 44.2 seconds down pit lane. A much quicker stop than virtually the entirety of the grid, and his competitors in the elite category, they were in the high teens to early 20s compared to Fairley at 15. I am going to make a bold prediction right now. That's the first time I've ever really said something like this on the air, but I feel like this is the opportunity where it should be said. If he gets that car all the way to the checkered flag, full transparency, folks, I keep a thing of Post-it notes right by my desk so I can write down my thoughts whenever I'm on the air. If he gets that car all the way to the checkered flag, I'm going to eat one of these Post-it notes live on the air here on Apex Racing TV.
Okay.
I just do not believe he's going to be able to do that, because that is just what is his car going to be fueled with towards the end of this race? A hope and a prayer? That is a ridiculously short stop. That or his mechanics and iRacing have been drinking a whole lot of Red Bull, which is not a sponsor or an affiliate with Apex Racing TV at all. Just need to make that clear on the air. But Odin's, if Fairley has misjudged this horribly, he may be in the catbird seat to take the win. Certainly on track for a pretty commanding P2 result. He's got King about 12 seconds behind him, so Owens running in a good spot, but Fairley, there's a pun to be made that I'm fairly certain that he won't make it into the pits, spending far less time down pit lane than other cars around him, despite the fact he only came into the pits 2 laps later. It just, unless he was fuel saving like an absolute madman, as Corey Price has big wall contact coming out of the 3 and 4 chicane, this may be an opportunity for Joe Glass to take the lead in the premier standings with a pretty significant wall contact for Corey Price. He came into the pits, one of the earliest drivers, pitted all the way back on lap 17, but Price dealing with the burn heading through that section, mega loose, mega tight, hitting that barrier. Getting back to the point that I have been trying to make, this would stun me if Fairley can make it to the checkered flag. He's still got 15 minutes left to finish this race on barely any fuel at all.
Well, I don't know how many, Lamborghinis over the past, 60, 70 years of the company's existence. I don't know how many of them have ever been fitted with LPG, but maybe that's what Andrew is running on at the moment, because he clearly has a either bigger fuel tank than everyone else, or he's running on something completely different entirely, because that is incredible. And like I said, for some people out there thinking, well, he didn't take tyres, a lot of other people didn't as well. It's about half of the field that haven't taken tyres, and the other half who have. And even then, the pit stops seem to be relatively the same. I mean, usually you'll fuel up until you can take tyres anyway, so it just evens out. So yeah, I'm very much in agreement. I'm confused, but if he makes it work, there will be a lot of questions being asked to Andrew Fairley after this race on how on earth he managed to do that. And like I said before, he doesn't need to make this risk now that Lucchesi's out of the picture completely. As well, Lucchesi's down in 10th. Not really what he wanted this race to become, as he's kind of in no man's land right now. He's got 4 seconds to and back from any car around him. As well, I said before that Denner Brager might be able to get 5th in this race. He's currently on for a podium. He's 7/10 behind Luke King in 3rd. Denner Brager's had an absolutely storming race. Considering that awful first lap he had, he's now back up to where he started. I mean, you would say that 3rd is probably going to be the best he can do, as I don't know, if he can gain 13 seconds in about 13 minutes, but it's not impossible. But I think even for a man like Denner Brager, that's asking a bit.
Yeah, that is going to be a big ask for him. He's very fast in this series. Don't get us wrong. He already has 3 victories on the board. Don't think he's going to get a 4th tonight, though. That is for certain. He's not going to close up that gap to himself and fairly by about 25 seconds between now and the end of this race. Even then, closing up to Odin's, that would be a pretty big ask as well. Got to turn on the Hyper Jets. Use a little bit of a Spaceballs quote if anyone watched that Mel Brooks classic from back in the day. Got to turn on the Cuisinarts to try and close up that gap, but the fight between himself and King is very much on those 2 cars covered by barely in the air, coming out of the 6 and 7 chicane on this 30th lap of this 1 hour long race with 47 coming up to 48 minutes on the clock. Denner Brager putting on a storming recovery drive, and the next closest car to him behind is this driver, Daniel Lee, in the 271 Mercedes. However, he's got a fight on his hands right now. That is not an in-class car that he's got right behind, trying to figure out who that may be. That's John Brainback, possibly right behind him. Actually, no, that I believe is a lapped car between himself and Brainback, as it's about 5 seconds between Lee and Brainback. According to our producer Josh, it may possibly be Luke Van Gortel, who's certainly not had a good start to this race at all, but nevertheless, Lee, he's been very impressive thus far. I think he's certainly being held back by the fact he is driving this Mercedes, but Aaron, you raised a very good point earlier on during this broadcast. Daniel Lee has been quick. Oh my god, who is that with the 2-wheel action heading through the final chicane? That may, unless I'm very much mistaken, might have been Bearings, possibly? Trying to figure out who that was. Just saw that at the corner of my eye as I was going to touch on a point involving Danny Lee, but I just saw a Porsche 2-wheeling and flying that car like a kite coming out of the final chicane. That was awesome that I just saw a couple of moments ago. Maybe either Ruben Bearings or Berkt Bearings. That certainly wasn't Berkt Bearings, as you can see him hanging through turn number 1 and 2 right now. Either way, one of the DDK by ES Academy cars, I believe that was the car that I saw having a major airborne moment coming out of the chicane. I'm not sure if you saw that, Aaron, but we got to see a fantastic view of the underside of a Porsche GT3 race car, and I thought we were going to roll one over for a second.
Well, it's very possible with the extremely high curbs at this track. I don't think they're as big as that now. In real life, as you mentioned earlier on, this is quite an old scan of Montreal, but in fairness, has anyone ever really complained about that? I don't think they're that desperate to get a new scan of this track, if I'm being honest. It's still the same layout as it was however many years ago this scan is. It's just a couple of the curbs are different. I mean, maybe iRacing might in the future, but I can't imagine it's going to be anytime soon, to be honest. I think the track is mostly fine as it is. It's still Montreal as we know it, so we can carry on racing round it as we know it. As Marcel Breitenbach, looking at the back of Brandet, who's currently leading in the Evo class. And, well, we've seen him get his elbows out just a few times today. Let's hope that he doesn't do it again, because, quite frankly, it's terrifying. As that's Breitenbach going a bit deep into the last chicane. As, no, Brandet is just going to let Breitenbach go. As, no, actually, I think Brandet might have gotten a slowdown from that. And, well, one or two more of those, and he's going to have Brooks right on the back of him.
That fight's certainly going to continue for the leader in the Evo category. He's got a 2.6 second gap to himself and Ashley Brooks. So Ashley Brooks slowly but surely reeling in the Frenchman. So we'll see how things shake out. Certainly hoping that lightning is not going to strike twice in Francois Brandet's going to get involved in another incident during this race. That was the first voice crack that I've ever had during this broadcast. I'm not sure if that came across on the microphone at all. Going to self-report that matter though. But nevertheless, looking at some fights up and down this grid. One driver who's running like it's a Sunday afternoon cruise, or a Thursday afternoon cruise, or evening, depending on where you are. Andrew Fairley having a fairly convincing drive here. No, those puns will never grow boring. But at this point in time, he's got a 10-second gap in the elite category. I'm not even sure where the closest car is to him on the racetrack at this point. He is running all by his lonesome, maybe starting to sing "One is the Loneliest Number" if he starts to run in this position much longer. Gotta say, though, for a driver like Fairley, who's had a really rough go of things thus far in this season, as we mentioned towards the start of this race, he entered this 12th in the elite standings, and it got a best finish, I believe, coming at the second race at Indianapolis of P7, but outside of that, he has had a torrid time of things thus far. So Fairley looking to try and do something that we probably did have in mind for him heading into this race meeting, heading into this broadcast today, and that is grab a victory as an elite driver. It's been a meltdown for RDSA Esports. Tristan Denabrega looks like he's going to be the better finishing of the two of them and trying to extend his gap in the Drivers' Championship, but Fairley looking to try and be the star of the day if he has enough fuel. That point that I raised earlier about me eating a post-it note still stands if he can make that car to the checkered flag, but I gotta say, that gap to himself and Ryan Odens is diminishing. I think he is very much backing off. I think clutching and coasting, extending the coast into the corners, Fairley may be in some trouble.
Well, in some trouble is putting it lightly. I think we looked at the gap a few laps ago and it was at 10 seconds. For those with the gift of sight, it's now 7.3. So
that rules me out.
Well, luckily I'm perfectly fine. I've never had glasses in my life, and I hope I never will. Denabraga's just got past King as well. That's for third place, so he's finally managed to put himself onto the podium. But just keep an eye on that gap up at the top, because that could come down over the next few laps. But Andrew Fairley on his last lap was actually pretty quick. I think he was the quickest man out on track, so maybe just had one iffy lap, not sure. But here is the move for the podium place overall and in the elite. Very late on the brakes for Denabrega, but you can do that into turn one, as it kind of puts you in a perfect position to defend the line into turn two. And he did that absolutely perfectly and got himself up into third. And not only has he managed to gain, I think it's 16 places from when he had his incident on lap one, he's also just gained one more, better than when he started. So if anything, he should be over the moon that he had that incident.
I mean, I maybe wouldn't go that far, but nevertheless, I'm sure he's very happy about the recovery that he's had ever since that incident. Maybe dodged a bullet, possibly, if he didn't get involved in that incident. May have been involved in some of the earlier difficulties that befell a lot of these drivers. Speaking of a difficulty that's befalling one driver who's had a fairly smooth run of things, the ADX Racing Esports 246 Lamborghini, driven by our race leader, Andrew Fairley. Looks like he's picked up the pace somewhat, as that gap is flatlining between himself and Ryan Odens, still maintaining around that 8-second margin. May have been a series of mistakes, possibly that, or he was just backing it off in terms of fuel sakes. Ryan Odens, last few laps, he's been consistently inside the 135s. The last time he was outside of that 135 gap in terms of pace, and pace alone, was all the way back on lap 22 outside of his run through the pits. He has been militarily consistent in that 264 Ferrari that we're seeing right now. My occasional poor sight coming back to bite me on the butt there a couple of moments ago, but the F1 esports car has been mightily consistent, fairly still holding the fastest lap of the race at this point in time, coming up to about 4 minutes left on the clock. Will it be Odin's grabbing a shock victory, or will it be Fairley hanging on, having enough fuel to make it to that checkered flag, and forcing me to eat a pink post-it note? The tension is building, and I'm really worried that I'm going to get some paper cuts on my tongue, because it looks like Fairley is picking up that pace.
Well, he's doing more than picking up the pace. He is by far the quickest man on track right now. The next closest driver to him in terms of lap time is Ryan Oates, and he's still 0.6 slower than Andrew Fairley. Although, on that lap anyway, Fairley just lost a huge chunk of time again. 2 seconds, in fact. So I've literally no idea what is going on with Andrew Fairley. He sets, a new lap record one lap and then loses 2 seconds the next. So I'm really not sure what's going on inside the Englishman's head. But whatever it is, he's still leading. For now, let's hope he can actually get to the end of the race. I think he'll have 2 more laps after this. I think. My math skills coming into this. As Corey Price, of course, leading in the Premier class. He's had a really good day, a really underrated day, actually. We've not spoken too much about the Dutchman, but he has just been... Well, he's just had a boring race, which is kind of what you want up at the front of the field in any class. And, well, he's just driven a textbook race. No mistakes, not really done too much fighting. And he's going to take probably another race win in the Premier class. So, good on him. That's going to be good for his championship hopes. And Joe Glass briefly had a challenge on for the leader of the Premiers, but I think just backed off over the last few laps. Then it's just settling into a rhythm nicely, and I think he'll be probably happy with second place. I believe that will be his best finish of the season so far, so I think he can be happy with that one. You're making
Fairley's losing time.
He is. Oh my god, I just noticed that.
Yeah, it was about 6 seconds not terribly long ago. It's now down to 3.5. Running into some difficulties with some lap traffic is another Lamborghini right in front of him, trying to get a number off of that race car. That is the 152 Lamborghini right in front of him.
He's probably
being driven by Alex Fretwell. This is disastrous for
fuel.
Andrew Fairley. Is he saving fuel? Is he enjoying the draft off of that Lamborghini? Or what? You can see him furiously flashing his headlights, heading down the back straightaway off into the 8 and 9 chicane for what is going to be one of the final times in this race. Over a minute left on the clock, so Fairley has one more lap of racing action. You can see him pushing that car, heading through the chicane. He is not happy about the fact that he's got some lap traffic to deal with in front of him. And I'm curious, how is it going to work out? Fairley, he's been quick in this race, certainly has been the dominant driver thus far. However, Ryan Oden's right behind. That gap is still around about that 3.5 to 4 second barrier. There you can see him a little bit farther in the back, a shot in that Ferrari. We need to remind ourselves about how Odin's nearly won a race earlier on this season. That coming at the doubleheader of Indianapolis earlier on in this season's schedule. Was on track to win that second race. However, connection issue ended up deciding his fate. But going on to the start-finish straight away for the second to last time, Fairley going to see that white flag in the air and going to be elated the fact that the white flag is in the air for him. Last time by at a 1:36, and he can see spinning. Is that Brooks? I think that may not be Brooks.
No, I don't think so.
Exactly, it is. So Brooks not losing out some time in the Evo category. That may end up being possibly not figuring out who that is.
Keenan, I think.
Barron's losing a little bit of time. Chris Keenan, you said, is the one that just had that difficulty in the number 76 McLaren. Heading off through the corner. Yeah, it looks like Keenan losing out on some time as well. There is Keenan. So yeah, he was the one going for a spin a couple of moments ago. So the Premier GT3 racer running into some difficulties. Right now, Joe Glass, who is falling right now, running second at the moment, dealing with some difficulties of his own. That's Lucchesi getting a move put on him to move up another position overall.
Ooh,
but he's still running 8th at the moment, and look at it, this banging doors and banging wheels heading down into the final chicane. Ashley Brooks nearly running into some difficulties. Who was that? Was that Bearings?
That was Ruben Bearings.
Ruben Bearings. Ruben Bearings just assigned to tow back to the pits. I'm not sure what went wrong there, but that's a big amount of drama for him. But Andrew Fairley in the 246, the ADX Racing Esports car, he hasn't lost out on a whole lot of time in this last lap. It's only been about a second, but it's going to be 3 seconds enough that's in his back pocket, and he's coming out of the final chicane for the final time in this race. And Andrew Fairley, the Brit, going to cross the line in that Lamborghini to take the victory here at Montreal. Andrew Fairley victorious, having to pull off some fuel saving and having his fingers crossed in that final stint. He's still going to end up with the checkered flag when everything is said and done. Ryan Odin's going to finish behind in second. Tristan Denabrega going to end up rounding out your elite podium in third. A fantastic recovery drive for the RDSA Esports driver. Despite the fact he's had some setbacks and had a setback at the very beginning of this race, he wanted to try and keep his nose to the grindstone, and boy did he ever. Corey Price, meanwhile, he kicked the season off with a victory at Le Mans a couple of months ago. Now he's going to be victorious here at Montreal. Once again in the premier category. There's a checkered flag for the Dutchman of Corey Price. Joe Glass going to finish about 4.5 seconds back in P2. Waiting now to see how Francois Brandet finishes this race. He's got an 8-second gap to himself and Ashley Brooks, and he's going to be going on to that start-finish straightaway for the final time in this race. Flashing his headlights, he may have gotten involved in an incident earlier on, but he's going to be victorious here at Montreal. But Fairley, with a beautifully executed final stint. I'm going to have to eat a Post-it note, aren't I? He just grabbed the victory. He defied physics. I still don't know how he managed to do that, Aaron.
No, honestly, I really don't either. That is an incredible feat by Andrew Fairley. I mean, not just his fuel strategy. I mean, just he has been just incredible in terms of pace today. I don't think we've seen such a dominant margin such a small track as well. That's one of the biggest things. Is this is really not a big track at all. It's one of the smallest tracks that we're going to this season. It might even be the smallest, and he was on average, I think, about half a second quicker than the rest of the field, which is just absolutely mental. He picked up fastest lap as well, which is just going to be, bragging rights for him at the end of the day. But honestly, whatever he's put in that Lamborghini, it's clearly working, at least at Montreal. Let's see if he can keep this going for at least a few rounds more. But yeah, just hats off to Andrew Fairley. That was a really, really impressive performance. And Corey Price as well, another driver who's done really well, picked up a victory in his class. Brandet obviously picked up that win in the Evos, but with some issues that he might pick up some penalties for. But either way, apart from those few issues, he performed pretty well as well.
As a pretty well executed drive from a lot of the drivers up and down the grid, but I think the driver who is, without a doubt in my mind, the most impressive is our victor, Andrew Fairley. Time has come, I'm afraid. I'm a man of my word. I've taken some precautions, though. Firstly, I'm recording this on my phone so I can send it in our small little broadcaster chat to prove that I am not lying when I say that I am doing this. I've ripped off the adhesive on the Post-it notes. It should be noted that I bought these right before my freshman year of high school, back when that was about to start in 2019. So I'm not sure if these are entirely safe to consume, but nevertheless, bombs away. Oh boy. Been many years since I ate paper. Probably not. It should be noted at this point in time on this broadcast that the stunts that you're seeing at this point in time are made by a professional loudmouth who's doing this mainly just to get a laugh out of people. But yeah, this may not be the smartest idea in the world, and we're going to move into the results here from this broadcast. Some many odd things going on the air today, but nevertheless, Andrew Fairley wins it when everything is said and done. Ryan Odin's going to finish right behind in second, only 3.2 seconds separating those two cars when everything is said and done. Trisha Denabrega going to round out your overall podium in third. Oh boy, Luke King going to finish in fourth, Daniel Lee in P5. May have my teeth be stained pink as a result of that escapade. Daniel Lee going to finish in fifth. Corey Price going to win it in the Premier category in sixth when everything is said and done. Jean Brainback going to finish in seventh. Luke Lucchesi ends up finishing this race in P8. A little bit of a disappointment for him for sure to finish seventh as an elite driver, P8 overall. That is going to hurt out his championship aspirations for sure. However, the one driver that gained on him for sure is going to be our championship leader of Trishan Denabrega. Joe Glass going to finish right behind in 9th. Dean Powell going to finish in 10th. Rounding out your overall top 10 in the process, Berks Bearings ends up finishing 11th as a premier driver. Stefano Gattuso finishes in 12th. So pretty nice recovery drive for him despite being involved in an incident earlier on and doing most of the first half of this race without a front bumper. He ends up finishing this race in 12th. Marcel Brainback going to finish in 13th. Peter Black finishes in P14. Francois Brendette finishes in 15th. Thomas Pugh finishes in 16th. Should be noted that Francois Brendette taking the Evo victory as a result. So Pugh going to finish right behind in 16th. Stephen Donnelly finishes in 17th. Ashley Brooks ends up in 18th. It's the first time that he's finished one of these races and has not stood on the top step of the podium, but either way, pretty well executed drive from Ashley Brooks to finish this race in 18th. Darren Schruppel's going to finish down in 19th. Robin O'Brown going to round out your overall top 20. And rounding out the top 25 is going to be Victor Van Zies, Chris Jennings, Joe Sparra, John Ludbrook, and rounding out your top 25 is the American behind the wheel of the Rage Against the Game esports Corvette of Malcolm Coates.
Well, Ron the Rabbit has done an amazing job of naming those top 25 drivers. Let's hope no more post-it notes get consumed. I did look up because it did scare me for a sec. Apparently they are safe to consume, so do not worry. For those of you who for some reason might be thinking about eating a post-it note of your own, there you are. But anyway, moving on. Alex Fretwell then, your first driver to finish a lap down in 26th place. Chris Keenan in 27th. Rob McKee in 28th, Jeffrey Darman in 29th, Martin Koch in 30th place, 31st is Gareth Newton, Hussein Serek de Slesser is 32nd, Roll Turf Crewer is 33rd, Sean Clark 34th, Ruben Bearings 35th, Paul Colishlaw in 36th, Tom Weston 37th, Matt Hoyland all the way down in 38th, Jeremy Allmans in 39th, Jonathan Provost in 40th place. And then your last few drivers, Luke Van Gorsel in 41st, Stube 42nd, Bostock 43rd, Maxim 44th, Van der Meer in 45th, and Danny Weir, I don't think ever took to the starting grid, but finished 46th nonetheless.
And so those are our results when everything is said and done. Just got a notification from Discord. Apparently that video exceeds the file limits on Discord, and I'm not going to be paying for Discord Nitro to send a very odd video of me eating paper well on the air. Anyways, I think we're just going to quickly and abruptly move on and move into some interviews before we wrap things up here today on Apex Racing TV. Got a driver waiting in the interview waiting area, that being Danny Lee. Aaron, considering I may have some paper cuts on the roof of my mouth, would you like to have a chat with Danny Lee?
I think paper cups might be the least of your worries, but yeah, sure. I'd be worried about my
mental health issues are.
Well, that and maybe some digestive problems in the coming days might also be worried. But anyway, hello, Daniel Lee. You've joined whatever this conversation is, but let's talk about something probably a bit more pleasant. Your race in that Mercedes, it didn't look fun up until it did. You finished 5th in the end. Considering how the rest of the race went, you must be pretty happy with a decent finish.
Yeah, I sort of joined the interview waiting area because I saw that your conversation was going off the rails. So I thought you needed something to distract you guys now. Yeah, let's get in there and put things back on track. But yeah, came into this pretty unpracticed. It's been a very, very busy week. I've squeezed a bit of practice in here and there because I don't want to come in, unprepared. But all things considered, there was a lot of attrition out there. I can usually rely on my experience and just sort of cool head, if I haven't practiced much, to sort of come along nicely, especially if it's an hour race. It gives me time for that to kind of ripple out and sort of even out. So yeah, 5th place from a pretty kind of scrappy qualifying was definitely better than expected, and really happy with that.
Yeah, you absolutely must be. And talking of attrition, you said you didn't have much time to practice, but at least when you did in today's session, just how difficult was it to fling those GT3 cars round here? Because it did not look easy at all.
I think after the first couple of laps, I settled in behind Luke King, who was in a Porsche, and I gotta tell you, it was infuriating just being able to kind of eat away the temps over the course of a lap, to be right on him at the hairpin, and then that Porsche puts its traction down and he was completely gone, immediately back up to half a second ahead. So there was nothing I could do against him. I was just creeping forward behind him during the lap, but then he would leave me behind. So he was very, very really good at maintaining his defense. He never lost his cool once, and in the end I lost out due to a slowdown. So it was my mistake that kind of broke that battle off for me. So amazing drive from Luke. He really did do a really, really good job keeping still under the pressure that I was putting him under. I tried everything, but it just wasn't happening.
Yeah, the slowdowns seem to be quite a big issue for a lot of drivers out there today. But nonetheless, still managed to pick up a nice 5th nonetheless. Well, going into the next race then, I will be completely honest, my mind's gone blank and I've completely forgotten what track we're going to next. You probably know, since you're racing in the series. So would you kindly like to do a better job than I'm doing, and where are we going next week?
I sure do. We're going to Red Bull Ring next week, which, admittedly, as I was trundling round to the pit lane on the cooldown lap, I had my phone out, immediately checking where we're going next, because I wanted to put Circuit Gilviano behind us. Me and Dean were both discussing how it just felt like it was a real anti-Merc track with all of its kind of slow traction limited corners. We did our best and we did better than we expected, but definitely didn't feel like it was a Merc friendly track. So looking forward to going to Red Bull Ring next week, where the fast corners with really kind of precise turn-ins should swing it back into our favour. We're just hoping that we continue to improve and put in a solid performance and stay out of the wars for the rest of the season, so we can get a good result.
Yeah, that's the problem with those front-engine cars at tracks like Montreal, that they have no weight over the rear whatsoever. It's all over the front and can end in disaster. But I'd say 5th place for you is not bad at all. Well, Red Bull Ring sounds like fun next week, and hopefully it's going to be. But anyway, thank you for coming and having a chat with us, Daniel. It's always a pleasure. And before we let you go, anyone you want to give a mention or shout out to?
It's a shout out to the league admins. As we've attended each round, we've begun to appreciate more and more the things that maybe we didn't notice in the early couple of rounds. You know, the admin do a great job of controlling and basically quality control on the grid. So we think they've really pulled it off. So thanks to James Bostock behind the scenes, and to you guys for the broadcast. You do a great job and we appreciate it. Very entertaining. So everybody involved with putting this all together and giving us a place to race every Thursday, and we're looking forward to the rest of the season.
Well, we very much are looking forward to the rest of it as well. Thank you for coming into the interview box. It's, like I said, always a pleasure to have a chat with you, Daniel, and good luck for next week.
Thank you. Cheers.
And that right there was Daniel Lee. Always nice to have a chat with him. A very nice guy, and I think his presence in the interview waiting area kind of got us back on track to talk about the racing action. And speaking of, Aaron, it was absolutely fantastic here at Montreal. I mean, both of us were kind of a little bit, I wouldn't say skeptical about the racing action that we had entering this race, but I think that race definitely delivered, and then some. The strategy content as well was really interesting. But heading to that Red Bull Ring for two 30-minute races on Halloween night, that is going to be a pretty good show there. How do you think that race is going to be in 1 week's time?
I think it will be chaotic, as Red Bull Ring tends to be quite good in these GT3s, to be honest. Every single time I've watched or raced with them around there, it always seems to provide some really, really good and a bit unpredictable racing. It's a track that not many people are actually too familiar with, so I think that should be a good watch and a little bit less strategic focus than today was.
Yeah, it is going to be two 30-minute races where these drivers are just going to be pushing it to the absolute limit and maybe a little bit over us. We'll just have to wait and see how that race is going to be in 1 week's time here from the Evolution Sim Racing GT3 Championship here on Apex Racing TV. And speaking of, we've got a whole lot of action here on Apex virtually every single day. Coming up later on tonight, in fact, or possibly tomorrow morning for those watching this broadcast in Europe, going to be round number 3 of the Detroit Region SCCA Sim Racing Series. That's going to be Formula 4 cars at Long Beach. Remember, there was a Apex Racing Academy F4 race at Long Beach a couple of seasons ago that, Aaron, I believe you were on the broadcast with. So I think I'll have to ask you about what sort of mental preparations I need to do for that race. But speaking of a broadcast you are going to be on, we've got action from the Radical Esports Cup week number 7 at Portimao coming up here on Apex Racing TV, catching the action from the Radical official series every single Friday. And if you're in the mood for some more sports car racing, how about you check out the Rickmatech Mini-Mite Sports Car Challenge. Round number 5 of that season going to be coming to you from Magny Core this upcoming Monday. So got a whole lot of action here on Apex Racing TV. Never a dull moment, and here on this broadcast it was anything but. From eating paper to pure fuel strategy related miracles, it was a fantastic day of racing action here at Montreal, and I think we've got a fantastic way to kick off the second half of this season, which we will be doing in just 1 week's time. But as for this broadcast here for round number 5 of this championship, that will just about do it. So for myself, Ron Mullins, Aaron Smith joining me in the commentary booth, Josh Wilkie doing a fantastic job working all the cameras in the virtual production hauler, and the fine folks at Post-it Notes making these things edible so I could be a man of my word. I say thank you all so very much for watching. Have a great rest of your night, and we hope to see you all wherever it is in the not too distant future.
Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.